This is our final lesson on the title of Introduction to SmartStruxure Objects. We're going to take a look at a live view of what we just looked at in the last lesson with PowerPoint. We'll just move around and look at the data flow and the edit bindings and hopefully make it all make sense to us. Okay, we're live with our plant project in an automation server with 3 I/O modules. As you saw in the last presentation, it's the program that is the heart of the system, and then that program moves uphill into a subsystem, and the subsystem collects with other subsystems to create a total system. Now, in our previous lesson we focused on the chiller subsystem, so I'll drill down here and find the program, and then I will right click and do edit bindings, as we talked about in the PowerPoint. And we'll bring up a window here that shows all of the things that are connected to this program. Slide down just a little bit to where we get to points in, points out, values in, values out is what we're focused on. So now you start to see all the data you saw in the PowerPoint. Here's chiller status coming in from the I/O bus, chilled water pump status coming in from the I/O bus, chilled water return temperature coming in from the I/O bus, and so forth and so on. Here's your chiller command feedback value. It's coming from an output module, but it is the value property. That's that feedback that we were talking about. Also, if you look in here very carefully in the light gray, you see log point, log point, log point, log point. If I move this over just a little bit more and move this over just a little bit more, you'll see the term monitored variable. Okay, log points talking about data going to trend logs. You see the log point concept. And here you see monitored variable. The chilled water supply temperature is the monitored variable to an alarm object. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trend logs looking at some of these objects within this program, and we have 1 alarm object looking at an object within this program. If I slide on down, I see points out. There's just the one. It's going to the physical point, to the requested value property. Remember, programs write to the requested value. The value property can be brought back into the program as feedback. Then we have values in and values out. These values are either coming from values or going to values, and those values can be located within the chiller subsystem or in other subsystems. So for example, condenser water supply temperature alarm status. Okay, that's in the plant project chiller subsystem. It's in the values folder. Okay, so there's the name of the value, and it's the value property. But right below it here we have request chiller. That's a value coming from the plant start subsystem. As for values out, the program is writing to these things. We have 2 values in the chiller subsystem that are being written to by this program. So looking at the various programs is where you get to see most of the data flow. That's the heart of each individual system. This is not to say if you have a sender and a receiver you can't look from the other direction. For example, I can go to the alarms here, and I can click on chiller alarm, and I'm still in the bindings window. And you see the other end of the spectrum. Here's the monitored variable is coming from a value as well. So there's a value going to an alarm. And I could go to a trend. I could highlight the chiller command trend log. Okay, and you see it's in the program's chiller aspect. So whenever you have a data flow binding, as we call it, there's a sender and there's a receiver, and you can edit bindings from either end to confirm the data flow. And again, we could move around a lot of different ones. I'll close off this video capture for a second, and then we'll come back and maybe go and look at just a few more of these programs. Okay, I have moved to a different subsystem, the chilled water pump, and I have zeroed in on the program, and I have done an edit bindings, and I see the window here to see what data is flowing into and out of that particular subsystem's program. And I have points in, points out, values in, values out. And here you can see some I/O bus flow. Here is a feedback value coming from a DO point. Here's a status sensor coming in from a digital input module. Here we are outputting to the requested value of a DO point. And then for the values in, we're coming from a different module, a different subsystem, if you will. Plant start, the values, request chiller, value property. And we're writing out to the chilled water pump subsystem, the one that we're in, the values folder, CHWPAL value. Okay, that's an object that's going to indicate whether or not the chilled water pump is in alarm. So you start to see a lot of similarity. Focus on the programs. If you edit bindings on the program, you'll see the majority of the data flow that's going on within a subsystem. You might miss one or two pieces of data flowing, but if you jump around to some of the trends and alarms and schedules, you'll pick up any stray cats and dogs. But the program is the heart and soul of each subsystem. It's the traffic cop, if you will, data coming, data going. It's how you understand how all these objects are glued together. Okay, that kind of brings us to the conclusion of this windshield tour, if you will, of an application inside an automation server with I/O modules and I/O points. How much of this you're going to have to know to do a startup and checkout, that's always an interesting discussion. You're definitely going to have to know how to determine where inputs and outputs are wired to the I/O modules. You're going to have to know how to calibrate analog inputs. You're going to have to know how to force points. There's a lot of different things we'll get into later in this overall training program. We'll come back and do some exercises on mock-up systems here, and we'll come back to the software platform and use some of what we've learned here. But at this point in time, I think we'll call it a wrap on the portion of SmartStruxure that deals with the automation server as a controller. In our next major section, we are going to go and add a field bus and put some LAN-based controllers on the field bus and take a look at what's going on inside them. And then in our final section of SmartStruxure, we'll go to a different field bus and look at some backnet controllers. So we've still got a ways to go, but I think we're doing okay. So I hope you've enjoyed the ride so far.